Welcome back. Today I'm going to show you how to make this. This is Diego's composting device for people who can't compost good, or a Johnson Su bioreactor that's been modified a little bit. So stay tuned. I'm going to show you how I did this and why I did it the way I did. I just got a fresh load of wood chips dropped off this morning. As you can see, it's still steamy, it's very hot, and the wood chips still have moisture in them. With the Johnson Su bioreactor, you want to wet down the wood chips and make sure that they have moisture in them when you're building it, because if you use older chips that are dried out, it becomes very hard to have them take up water. They end up becoming hydrophobic. So this is the perfect time to build the reactor because these wood chips are fresh. So the first thing we want to do is prep the site, and I'm going to end up doing it right here in my avocado grove because this is where it's going to end up getting spread anyways. So it makes sense to make it right here. I also built my Johnson Su bioreactor slightly different. I take more of the Diego footer approach, where I actually keep mine on the ground because I know I have lots of beneficial bacteria in here, and I also have worms that are populating this area because of all the wood chips we've had down for the last couple of years. I'm going to go ahead and take all these wood chips that we laid down, and I'm going to rake them out and try to make a nice flat level surface. So I'm using a cattle panel from Tractor Supply to make my Johnson Su bioreactor. The reason I went with this is it's galvanized and it's a really thick metal, so it's not going to rust over, and I'll be able to reuse this year after year, not worrying about it degrading. These come in 16-foot lengths, and if we remember from high school, pi is 3.141529. So if we take that, times it by 16, it'll give us a diameter of 50 inches. It'll probably be a little bit less because the way I do this, I do have a slight bit of overlap of two of the squares. So that way they hold each other well, and I have lots of points of contact to keep this from busting open. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you how I actually construct my version of the Johnson Su bioreactor. So you can see there is fungal growth that's happening right here in the wood chips. That's all incredibly beneficial for the soil and the trees. The trees definitely like fungally rich soil. It makes sense to put the reactor over here and allow what's already naturally occurring in my avocado grove to continue and inoculate my new pile. From what I've read, it seems as though oxygen only penetrates about a foot into a compost pile or even into soil. By putting in the big, I believe it's a 10-inch, maybe a 12-inch air conditioning piping, by putting just one of those in, that closes it to a little over 2 feet in between the center circle to the outside. So that's going to give it enough airflow. This is the pipe I use. I actually use this on my retort for when I'm making biochar. It's the chimney, but it's upside down because this big lip, we don't want to bury the lip. Otherwise, it's going to be impossible to try and pull this out. This is going to go ahead and go in the center, and then we can go ahead and start filling this up. So the next part in constructing this is actually going to be putting in the weed mat. These are very large holes. I believe they're 8-inch by 4-inch at the top. So any material you put in would fall out easily. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a piece of weed fabric to line the inside of this to hold in all that material. All right, so I have my weed fabric, and I was actually able to find some hog panel clips. It's they're just these little C's that you just crimp them and close them. So that's what I'm gonna end up replacing those zip ties with real quick. And then I will put this on the inside and use those zip ties to hold that up. And then we can go and start filling this up. They do make a specialty tool to use these, but I just use these. You hold it in, it goes around, and then you close it. So right here, I have a pile of mushroom compost, which has been sitting here for a few days. With the first one, I did the layering method where I did wood chips, manure, until the entire thing was full. This time, I want to see if mixing it and then putting it into the bioreactor makes a difference. Is it going to break down faster? Is it going to get hotter, or will it stay hotter for longer? And kind of evaluate if there's any pros or cons for the slightly more effort it takes to mix them going into the reactor. Load of several to fill this thing up. So I'm starting by filling around the pipe first. That way it holds itself upright as we start filling this. One thing you don't want to happen is for this pipe to tip over or move, and then that will mess up having your center airflow once you pull it out. This is now the third one. Okay, from right now, it's significantly more work doing it this way than it is to layer it. It's gonna take a lot of wheelbarrows to fill this up. So I'm gonna go back up and start mixing and filling. This wheelbarrow right here is number 14, and we're starting to get to the top. So right here is my first Johnson Sioux bioreactor. I originally posted this on Reddit just to see what the composting community thought of it, and I got a lot of questions about it, and that's why I actually decided to make the video I did. So these are just a couple of the questions I got, and I was just gonna run through these. This is a Johnson Sioux bioreactor. So I did modify this from their original idea. I don't have it on a pallet, and I went with one single tube in the center. So this is gonna take 1 year to compost. I filled this with wood chips, and this is my first one. This is filled with horse manure and wood chips. Initial setup of this, around day 5 or 6, it hit 155 degrees. I water this one every day. It is really close to a water source, so I will be hooking up a irrigation tubing and having it on an automatic waterer. The reason this is gonna take so long is because it's no turn. It's a completely static pile, so what we're shooting for is lots of fungal growth. The reason I wanna go with fungally dominated compost, I have mainly orchard on my farm. It's a lot of avocados. I have quite a few pomegranates and guavas. So by not turning it, we're actually allowing fungal dominant species to take over. If we turned it, we'd constantly be breaking the fungus's hyphae strands, and then it would have to
put a lot of effort into growing out and looking for its food source again. All right, and one last thing about these, they do sink quite a bit, so you can overfill it. Originally when I built this, I did have the one center tube in here, and it's still holding well, no issues. But this pile has sank, I believe these are 6 inches. Each one of these vertically is 6 inches. So this is probably sank close to a foot now, maybe 10 inches. But the center hole is still fine and it's allowing airflow into there. So that means 1 foot from this edge is getting air, and then 1 foot from here is getting air. So from what I've read, about 1 foot is the depth in which oxygen is able to penetrate soil or a compost pile. So there shouldn't be any anaerobic areas in this compost pile. The next thing that's gonna end up happening with this pile, once it cools down to around 80 degrees and it stays stable, then that's when I'm gonna go ahead and add in my red wiggler worms to the pile. You don't wanna go and add them in before it's under 80 degrees because they're not gonna be happy. They'll either die off or they'll try and find a way out. Once you're positive it's under 80 degrees, so taking your temperature probe and probing this in several different spots to make sure, then you can go ahead and add them, and they're also going to do a lot of work with breaking this pile down. Worm castings are extremely beneficial, so by allowing them to be in here, they're also going to help with aeration, but their castings will get mixed into this. They won't completely make this entire thing a giant bin of worm castings, but they do aid in the breakdown and bringing in different bacteria and fungi into the system. All right, so let's go see how the other pile is looking now that it's been set up for about 3 or 4 days. All right, so here is the compost pile 4 days later. So the last thing to do is just pull this out. I'll probably end up doing this tomorrow. The pile's at 145 and it'll probably hit 150 tomorrow once I pull the tube out. And then a couple days it'll slowly go down, and once it hits 80, I'll go ahead and add the worms in. This pile has probably sank 4, maybe 6 inches already. So I'm kind of contemplating putting another layer or 2 on top, but I do want to remove the tube, that way the center can start breathing. All right, hope you enjoyed. See you on the next one. Bye.